But faced with growing dissent, he turned the boat around, heading back the way they had come. One Marine began to go mad, laughing hysterically, until he slumped over in silence, dead. Another man died shortly after, and then another. Their bodies were tossed into the sea. Alright, welcome to Billy's Books. Today we're going to read about The Wager, a tale of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder by David Grann. I was in the LaGuardia airport at the beginning of July, stranded because they canceled my flight with no explanation. And I had all day to spend there, and so I got this book. I think they put it in this book, put it just to make us feel better about being stranded in the airport. This is from 1740, not the 17th century as I had previously said. England was during a little war, was at war with a little war with Spain, the War of Jenkins' Ear, from 1739 to 1748. It was mostly fought in the New World. This shipwreck happened on the coast of South America. They struggled. Let me back up a little bit. So there was a small squadron of British ships in pursuit of this. They had a secret mission, and that was to pursue this galleon of silver. The Spanish had this, they believed, had this enormous galleon just filled with American silver, and they were going a long way. They were just getting tons and tons of stuff. So it would be a huge victory for the British if they could either sink or, better yet, steal that ship. And so they sent this squadron. The Wager was a converted merchant ship with traveling along with 4 proper British warships, and that whole squadron was commanded by a Commodore Anson, and the Wager was originally captained by Dandy Kidd. Isn't that a great name for a captain? Anyway, but we're going to just jump right into it. We're going to say a few things. Right here's a quote that just comes right after the name Dandy Kidd. Maybe he said it. Maybe it's famous. I don't know. Death is at all times solemn, but never so much as at sea. So Dandy Kidd dies. Yeah, that's probably why they have that quote. Dandy Kidd dies, and Captain or Lieutenant Cheap gets promoted to captain in this small ship because it's a relatively small ship. He becomes captain. He'd been wanting to be captain his whole life, like most of the lieutenants, I imagine. He got it. So the squadron all tries to go around Cape Horn, do the whole incredible thing. The body of water below the South America is the Antarctic Ocean, or whatever it's called. But that is the only place on Earth where there is no the water can rotate all the way around the world, aka Antarctica, and unobstructed. So that water really moves, and it has this cycle. And when you come from the Atlantic to the Pacific going against this, it's not easy. And when the Atlantic and the Pacific meet at the tip, where this Antarctic spinning is happening, it is the most deadly place for seamen in the world, or at least one of them. And they tried to go through, and they all got separated. Some of them sank. They didn't know. Wager got isolated, and they just kept going because they're British seamen, and that's what they do. They keep going. So they did, and they were like, well, eventually we'll try to catch up with Commodore Hanson or whoever's left, and and we'll still get our medals because we're British sailors. But it gets worse and worse and worse, and they eventually end up shipwrecked. There's a lot of people who wanted to go back, but they went forward anyway because Cheap was motivated to get that prize and all that, and make a name for himself. But as they on the west coast, the Chilean coast of South America, they're going up because they made it past in beat up condition, and they're going up the coast, and things are rough over there too because it's a small damaged ship, and they keep on getting. Well, they eventually got to the frustration of the underlings. They got pulled in and got shipwrecked on this island, which is now called Wager Island because those guys were shipwrecked there for a long time. So they land, and they don't have much. The shipwreck is sort of in the within reach of the. They can swim out to it and sort of get supplies, and they did that a lot, and that kept them alive for a while. But they ran out. Eventually, they ran out, and the building, the island itself, didn't really have much to eat. They were living off seaweed. There weren't really any critters or anything, or any people. They were afraid of people, but they never saw them. Captain Cheap was a grumpy kind of captain, and a lot of people thought he was incompetent, and the sailors, the British sailors who were stranded, they started breaking into factions. There was the Cheap faction, captain, law-abiding, and then there was this guy Bulkley, who was very eloquent, and actually probably was better skilled for leadership, but he wasn't. By gathering people around him, that's what we call mutiny. Eventually, when they started disobeying him, and they outnumbered. Bulkley was so reasonable so all those sailors that he had more people than Cheap did. So anyway, they had broken masts. So there's the boat that they can keep on tapping to, and a third contingent, the Bulkley crew, the Cheap crew, all. But then there was a third crew of really bad guys who would just swim out to the boat and just take stuff for themselves instead of sharing. And they eventually got pushed away into the woods, and they were sort of out there and dangerous. And then the two main groups sort of fought it out, and it got really ugly. And at a certain point, there was one guy who was really disobedient, and he got sort of smacked down by Captain Cheap. And even though he was unarmed, Captain Cheap shot him in the jaw. And he didn't die immediately, but he did die later. And that is one, you don't go shooting unarmed people. So that's a real problem on Captain Cheap's side. So he did that bad thing. Meanwhile, of course, all of Bulkley's crew, all of his people, they're just bad for doing mutiny. But then when they eventually were started fighting over they tried to build a raft. Oh, before they built a raft, some natives came in. The Kaweskars came in their boat. There were some native people from that area, and they came in on their boats, all cruising. They're like, "Oh, what's this? What are these pathetic white people? Let's help those pathetic white people." So they caught some food for them, and they sort of got them. They taught them a few things, like don't do this because that's incredibly stupid. Don't eat those berries. And then, to the amusement or surprise or whatever of the Brits, they camped there too, and they started living among the British sailors for a while. But then the Kaweskar, who were smart, despite the fact that the British called them savages, they were probably smarter people. These people noticed, they saw what was going on, even though they didn't speak the language. They could see what was happening between the two factions. And one morning the Brits wake up and they were all gone. And they never returned. The Kaweskar were like, no, we're just getting the hell out of here. So we never saw them again. So they were back to starving because they were dumb and whatever. And they were eventually got the idea to build a raft, build a couple boats, whatever. And they took the long boat that was in the belly or wherever it was on the ship, and they took it out and they took it apart and added a middle to it with some other boards, and then built so it was a bigger boat. And they were going to take that out, and they also had a couple little rowboats and stuff. And then, but the faction got so bad that when they finished building it, they argued about whether to go further up the west coast to chase the galleon or whatever. Captain Cheap had this crazy idea. Well, from our little tiny little boat, we can grab a Spanish, we can overtake a Spanish merchant ship and then use that to attack the galleon. And the other guys, the Bulkley crowd were like, A, that's crazy. B, we want to go home. So they had to fight over where they were going to take the boat. So at some point, the Bulkley crowd sort of overtook the smaller guys and took the boat and left. Now there was a couple going back and forth because of the water and stupidity and stuff, and they came back again, and they left again. And Byron, the great uncle or whatever of Lord Byron, who was later wrote actually about this. He took notes, a literate guy named Byron. He took notes, so his notes are used in this book as well as Bulkley's and Cheap's. And the first time they got in the boat, he thought that they were taking Cheap with them, but then they said set sail. So he was like, "Oh my God, this is bad because there's our captain out there and we're leaving." And they came back the second time. So when they came back, because with the tail between their legs because of the weather, they came back and they did the same thing when the Bulkley crowd left, abandoned them again. Byron stayed with Captain Cheap. That's probably going to save him, though he was worried about that being mutiny. The first one being mutiny, but I think he wasn't known. Maybe he'll be treated. Anyway, so then, so the two crew, then we follow the notes. The Bulkley crew, they did go back through. They went back through the Magellan's Pass, or whatever, but they doubted it. They weren't sure if they were going the right way, so they traveled for several days, and then there was some doubt, and they were like, "Okay, let's turn around." They went back. They got all the way back to the Pacific, and they were like, "Yep, that was the right," and they started again. So they lost all that time, but still, they eventually made it to Rio, because I guess Brazil was not. They weren't at war with Brazil, and so they made it to Rio, and they had to stay there for a while, and then they eventually got a British boat back to London, and so Bulkley's crowd got there, and as soon as they got there, they talked smack about Cheap. Bulkley published a book, and all the other sailors. It became a huge thing for His Majesty's service, and everyone assumed that being abandoned, by the way, tied up on the beach, Captain Cheap was dead, and so were the other guys. But a couple years later, they show up because they had their own crazy adventure where they went up and then they got captured by the Spanish, and then held for a couple years during this. But the war ended and they were released, so they made it back too. And then so they all got back, and Captain Cheap arrived in London with fire in his eyes, and he was just like, "I'm not writing a book. I'm taking this straight to the court-martial." And all of it's very intense. It's very well written. I have to say, it's enjoyable. If you like, ocean adventures, this is all about that. You can feel those planks. You can smell those stanky guys. You can see the boils when they get scurvy. It's all very, very exciting. So I would recommend this book. It's well done. Yeah. While Captain Cheap was still captured by the Spanish, he actually got to meet Admiral Pizarro, who and they had suffered the same kind of fate as Commodore Anson's, which is their fleet got destroyed going around the tip. So yeah, it's a very exciting book. I would recommend it if you like these sort of ocean adventures. It was a bestseller. Yeah. If you can't do review,